This video is kind of a combination. It falls under prepping and it falls under resistance operations. It is choosing a bug out spot or a patrol base. Now the criteria that I have for this is most of the stuff that I look for when I'm out doing reconnaissance in my area and I'm trying to pick spots on, okay, where could I potentially put in a base camp, which is a place that you're going to occupy for up to a month, 4 weeks, 30 days, or finding a location that will work out as a patrol base so that you can do operations in that particular little area. Now this video came about because of conversations I have had with Bugout Bushido. Now he has a major pet peeve with the prepping movement, and that is when he talks to people and he asks them, well, what's your plan if this happens or this happens? You know, scenario doesn't really matter. He asks them, well, what's your plans? And their response is, oh, I'm going to bug out to the mountains. I'm going to bug out to the national forest. I'm going to bug out to the swamps. I'm going to bug out to here, bug out to there. And then he'll ask, well, have you chosen a spot in that area that you're going to bug out to? And he basically gets the reaction of deer in the headlights. They look at him, they blink, and you know, it's just not processing in their mind. They literally believe that if something happens, they're just going to head to that forest, head to those mountains, head out into that swamp, and magically, as they're scared to death, as they're tired, they're worn out, they're going to walk right into the perfect spot. You're going to have a rainbow come out of the sky. You're going to see unicorns running across it, telling you that this is the location. This is where I'm going to survive. This is where I'm going to rough it, and I'm going to do it just like the settlers did 200, or 400 years ago, as the United States was being, we were expanding across the country or across the continent, creating a new country. The reality is, if that is your plan, if your plan is to just go to this area and you're going to magically find a spot, you're going to die. Plain and simple, that is the truth on it. Just take that black pill suppository and shove it all the way up there as far as it'll reach. So what should you do? And I say this especially for those that are planning resistance operations. You need to pre-select locations that you can go to, so that if something happens, you have a plan. So that you know, hey, something happens, this is where I'm going to go to. If I have my vehicle, I'm going to park in this spot. I'm going to hide my vehicle this way. And then I have to go this azimuth, this distance, or use this trail till I get to this location. And then at that point, I shoot my azimuth to, the following direction and start walking that direction until I reach the next point. And you go out to each waypoint until you finally get to that patrol base location or that bug out spot. Not everybody has money. They can go out and they can buy a cabin in the woods. They can go out and buy 10 acres or 100 acres of property and, bring in a bunch of RVs and campers, drive them across country and, put them in. There's a lot of people, like I said, they're just going to go out and they're going to try to go with the flow. So the very first thing you need to do is a map reconnaissance. Look at satellite photos, look at topographic maps. You want topographic maps, not just road maps. You want maps that are going to show you the changes in elevation and also the prominent terrain features in that area. So when you get to the next step, you know what you're looking for. When you're looking on that map, you're going to mark out potential spots you want to check out, because you are going to have to go on the ground and check each physical location to see if it will still meet your criteria. Now, criteria that I have down, this is some of the stuff that I look for, not all of it. When I am considering a location for a potential patrol base, which you occupy for a max of a week, at most 2 weeks, 14 days, because you're operating in an area. And if you go that 2 weeks, you're doing that because you're primarily staying in that spot, preparing for an upcoming operation. Or when I'm looking for a location that will work as a base camp for a larger group. A base camp is a spot, you have more people, more than a platoon, and you're going to occupy that location for a maximum of 30 days, 4 weeks. Now, first off, the main criteria you need to have, and every veteran who served in the global war on terrorism, didn't matter where, the number one thing that we learned that you always had to keep in mind is water. So number one criteria, easy access to water. This water could be from a stream, it could be from a creek, it could be from a pond, a river, a lake, somewhere that you can get not quite potable water, you can't drink it yet, but as clean a water as possible. You want it by a water source that is not contaminated. No chemical runoffs in it. Plain and simple. Doesn't matter if it's industrial or farming. Keep that in mind. You can clean out all the sediment and garbage that's floating in it. You can add chemicals or filter it in order to kill off and remove parasites. But when it comes to industrial or farming chemicals, it is really, really hard to get that out of water. Number one criteria, access, easy access to water. Number two, your spot needs to be remote, hard to get to, because if it is easy to get to, I guarantee it, other people already have it in consideration, and by the time you get to that spot, you may find that that little location you were taking your family to or you were taking your unit to, there could be 20, 40, 100 people already camped out all over that spot because they had the exact same idea before you did. Number three, needs to be concealed, hidden. You want to pick a spot that hopefully marauders or an enemy patrol can literally walk right past it and they're not even going to see you're there. Provided you are employing light, litter, trash, and noise discipline. Number four, drainage. You may have found the perfect location in a ravine that meets all this other criteria, but what happens if storms move through that area? You get a massive thunderstorm that comes through. Is it going to be a gully washer? Your campsite is suddenly going to get hit with a flash flood and you got 10 to 20 feet of water rushing down that ravine? Drainage. Plus, you also got to take into account bugs. Things like mosquitoes, they require standing pools of water in order to breed. So you want to stay away from those spots. Next up, after I find a spot that meets this minimum stuff, I look at it as, can I defend it? How many access points are there into this area? And be realistic. You're not just looking for the easy ones, you're looking for the harder ones. The ones that the more persistent enemy might use to hit you. And when you're thinking of defendability, how long could you also hold out in that area until your family members are able to escape, or reinforcement or help could show up to help get you extracted from that location. After that, that's when you start looking at food and resources. What food sources are in the area? Fish, wild game, and it goes down to your small game too. Down to your little squirrels and rabbits, not just big game like your elk, moose, deer, caribou, horses. People used to eat horses too. You know, what plants are in the area and how easy is it for you to eat that stuff? You know, where's those berry patches at? Where's those walnut trees at, or those pecan trees at? You know, how far away? Are they relatively close, you know, that you're not going to be spending half a day to get there to get the stuff? Also in resources, firewood. You need to take that into account also, because you're going to have to try to stay warm as possible on the really cold nights. Who knows how long you're going to be at this location or the time of year you're going to occupy it. If you're occupying it in winter, you damn sure are going to need fires to stay alive, because you will run out of that Coleman camping fuel that you brought with you. Those little canisters of propane only last so long before they're empty. Now, if we got good check marks on all of these, next up you got to think about the dangers. Weather patterns, widowmakers. Weather patterns. What if a tornado comes through? A hurricane. Or, like I said before, rainstorm comes through. You get flooding. And one thing to take into account too, if you are semi-level with a large body of water like a river, and you get that spring thaw or a major storm come through, you want to make sure you are not on that floodplain where in the middle of the night you could wake up and your campsite is starting to get flooded out. Widowmakers, you're looking at animals, things like bears, mountain lions. I'll throw in there skunks too. They're more of a nuisance, but I'll throw those in there in widowmakers, because I'm sure if your family gets sprayed enough times, they're just going to want to kill you. They don't care. And also something to take into account there is large trees, especially standing dead trees. Ones that are dried out, the bark is falling off, they're ready to come over at any minute. You don't want one of them coming over in a big wind, falling on top of you in your camp. And then after that, that's when I start thinking about sanitation. Where's the spots I can put at that site for my food preparation areas, sleeping areas, and toilets, your field latrines, your cat holes, your pit that you're going to take a dump in or take a piss in. You have to make sure, and I looked this up, and I will put a link to this in the description. There is a military manual that deals with this. FM 21-10, Field Hygiene and Sanitation. There is a newer version of it that is out there that the Army has out right now. And I will tell you, I've looked through that manual and it is garbage. You get a lot better information from the old FM, so I'm going to put a link to a PDF on that. For sanitation, your toilets, your outhouses have to be a minimum of 30 meters away from your water sources, such as your creek or stream. It also needs to be at least 100 meters away from your food preparation areas, where you cook it, where you handle it, where you store it. And it needs to be down slope, so that if you end up with a rainstorm coming through and your field toilet floods, it's not going to overflow into that pond of water that you're using as your drinking source. It's not going to overflow into where you have your food preparation area. Feces and urine, I can tell you this from the desert, draws flies. It draws insects. Those insects will then spread contamination from those feces over to your food, over to your water source. Now, you find all this stuff on the map, you go out, you recon it. You actually check those areas. You get boots on the ground, pull out your list, and you go through the list again. Does it still meet each of those criteria, or doesn't it? If it does not meet enough of these areas in your mind that this is the location that you want to bring your family to in that complete collapse of the civilization, find another spot. If it doesn't meet your criteria for a patrol base, move on to another location. Maybe just take that down, mark it down as, occupation no longer than 24 hours, a rest location, a rest spot, or a possible resupply spot. If that area meets your criteria, I would recommend do some stealth camping out there for 24 to 48 hours. Get out there, put in that small hidden tent or whatever you're going to do. Monitor it. See how much traffic is in the area. See what the weather's like, all of that. Sleep in that area, find out, will this work? Not necessarily required, but it'll definitely help you, especially if you're picking out a bug out spot, a bug out location. Now I do have here a map. This is just something I threw together. Now, we found on our satellite photos, on our topographical maps, we think this area might work for us to bug out to. It is multiple miles away from the nearest major road, and it could be a state highway, a federal highway, or even a well-used county road. It's way back up in the woods, one of those places where it's going to take us an hour, 2 hours or more to walk there. And we're going to check it out. Now, as we're reconning the area, we find that there's game trails moving through, crossing the water here where it gets kind of shallow a little bit. We can see that they also move downstream, skirting this ridge line here. We check the other side. We see it goes up the hill and then also along the hill. The one up the hill might actually be from wildlife that's living up here coming down to drink early in the morning. So we start scouting out in this area and we start trying to choose the spot that best meets what we're looking for, what we want to do. What has enough room for us to set up our tent at, for us to set up our mini, hasty shelter, whatever it is, for a bug out location. And it may not be down in here. We may choose a spot that's, say, up on top of the hill here, or up on top of the ridge over here, because we could still walk down to get to our water source. Now, if you have any family members that are handicapped, they're disabled, you need to take that into consideration on how you're going to get them to that bug out spot, that bug out location. If you have small children, especially infants, toddlers 2 years old and younger, you got to take into account the noise that they're going to make also, because they are going to scream, they are going to cry and all that. Take that into consideration also. You want to be as far away from a farmhouse or someone's cabin or existing campsites as possible. Now we've chosen our location. And what we decided, the trail is over here. here's our deer trail. We decided we're going to put it in this little cubby here right off our stream. The deer trail comes through, stays parallel essentially with the stream, but we also got deer trail that comes down also off of the hill once again, so our wildlife can access water. So we've not looked at the area. We've determined we're going to put up our shelter, you know, just a bit above the water line, above the marks that we can see where flooding occurs. So we're up here on the hill here. Maybe we'll go through, we'll flatten out the area a little bit, dig it out some, take some of that dirt, put it on this side to build it up a little, or maybe potentially we'll start a small berm going around just to help. And now we're going to have to plan out and prepare our bug out location. So we're going to have to plan, where are we going to put our shelter? We're going to have to plan, where would we put our fire pit? How would we camouflage it from anyone that could potentially move through the area? We have to plan, where are we going to put our toilet at, our latrine? We have to plan, where is our food preparation area going to be? You do not want to prepare your food inside your campsite, because insects, rodents and that will be drawn to the smell of the food. You can store it in your campsite, but I wouldn't recommend preparing it there. You know, if you have to, have a spot a little bit farther away, preferably upstream, where you actually do the cooking of the food, so that if the smell of the food preparing draws anything, that's not drawing it directly to your campsite. Now, I have read that during the Rhodesian Bush War, it was not uncommon for the Rhodesian army to prepare their rations in the field when they did have to use cook fires, for doing it as much as a mile away from where their patrol base was. So they would dig their fire pit out there, essentially Dakota smoke hole, cook the food, cover it up, walk it the mile back to the patrol base, and they would eat it at the patrol base. Now also you got to think about, on your bug out location, how can you pre-prep the area? Where could you put in caches of additional food items, additional materials to build shelters, tools that would be too difficult for you to bring with? Also, where could you potentially plant and start patches of, say, the berries inside that area, where you could potentially plant, say, a couple of apple trees? That stuff does take time to mature to the point where it is going to produce any viable fruits. And there are vegetables that you could potentially start out there to try to get going wild. I know with my garden, I do end up with potatoes that grow wild inside my garden. I don't plant them. They come from peelings or from potatoes that were missed the year before. You'll have a new plant popping up where the plants were the previous year. I've also had that with tomatoes and also squash and sometimes zucchini. So who knows, maybe you can find a location, you know, and maybe you'll put in a few of those up there, get them cultivated, and essentially try to make them wild, that they're just going to be self-sustaining coming up every year. Another thing would be onions. I know wild onions was something we used to come across a lot when we were down at Fort Leonard Wood. You'd find them in the middle of the woods, so onions do keep coming back on their own. Another thing too, from when I was growing up in Minnesota as a kid, you could find asparagus growing in the ditches along on the dirt roads next to farms. So that's potentially something that you could put out there also as a wild edible. You know, something that will be self-sustaining. It'll keep coming in each year on its own without you having to do much work in that area. So now we've pre-prepped our area and that stuff. And we have a warm fuzzy. We got in there caches, we got food plots planted around and all that. You know, we check that area, say, once a year, just to make sure it's still good. Nothing's messed with your caches, nothing's dug them up. I just had that problem with the cache. We found that out during a recent recon. We had animals going after one of our cache totes for some reason. We still haven't figured out why. You know, go out there, check your stuff, make sure everything's good to go at least once a year. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Don't put everything that you have at one location. Set up multiple locations or scout out multiple locations. Now, if you're doing this as a patrol base, I'd still say put in some caches that you can use to resupply while you're there. You know, maybe have a little bit of that bulk rice and beans, but not that much of it. But you are going to want a lot of the individual type rations you can hand out. Those freeze-dried meals, packets of ramen noodles, yes, you can fill up on those. You know, whatever you come up with that you can put in the ground and store long term, don't have to worry about it going bad and that stuff. If you are doing this for your family as a bug out spot, I would think about having in there some basic medications, long-term ones inside your caches in that area, not necessarily antibiotics, but things like anti-diarrheals, anti-constipation meds, pain medication, because you're going to be really achy because you're going to be doing a lot more manual labor than you're used to. Allergy medication, not necessarily liquids. You want tablets. You want the hard tablets for this type of stuff. They store better and longer. Also remember, Band-Aids, things like work gloves, something that you may not have thought of, but you are going to need because you will tear up your hands, especially as you're doing work building up your location post-event. Well, guess what? Work gloves do work through. They do wear out. They get holes, fall apart. Have some spares out there inside those caches also. Doesn't matter if it's barrels or totes, but I will give you a recommendation. As little airspace as possible inside. Okay, you want to fill every available space because the more that tote, that barrel weighs, the longer it's going to stay in the ground. If you got a lot of air in there, a lot of light stuff in there, you're just going to have, from the normal freezing and thawing process, you're going to have what's referred to as ice jacking, where that tote, that barrel, will literally get pushed up and out of the ground. That's where it comes into doing your recons, and I'd really recommend do them in springtime after the spring thaw is done. So, we selected our spot. Take a drink here because I know I've rambled on for a while. Big event has now happened. Holy shit, you know, we had meteors falling out of the skies. The cities are burning as the meteors are hitting them, causing earthquakes, tearing them apart. You get your family, you toss them in the vehicle, you grab those bug out bags. Maybe not all of them, but you know, everyone should grab their bag. You grab whatever you can, and you know, maybe you see a couple boxes of groceries that are on the shelf in the pantry that haven't gotten put away yet. You grab those, toss them inside your vehicle, and as you're inside your garage, you're getting ready to pull out and that stuff. Before you open up that garage door, you realize, hey, maybe I should grab another shovel or something too. You get whatever, toss it in your vehicle, open up that garage door, it gets stuck, you pull that release latch, whip that thing open, there's nothing but chaos outside, and you start driving down that street as fast as you can. You're avoiding your neighbors as much as possible, making sure not to kill them, hopefully. And if you do hit them, try to just graze them where it bumps them off to the side as you haul ass out of town heading towards those mountains. Now, you get out past the devastation zone, you look behind you in the rear view mirror, and it looks like it is the apocalypse. It is the second coming of Christ. He is pissed off, and he is tossing those rocks down on the ground, smiting those unbelievers, wiping out the trannies left and right, and then turning those pedophiles into Roman candles. And I mean the old-style Roman candles, not the firework. Look it up. So you're hauling ass towards the mountain, and as you get closer and closer, you see that things are getting better and better. You think, okay, I've done it. We've made it out of there. We get to our location. We park our vehicle. Well, we start taking stock. Well, we only got half of the bug-out bags because everyone was scared to death, and only half of the family thought to grab their bags. So you're missing half your stuff right off the bat. Okay, that's not too bad. That means that the family members that forgot those bags, guess what? You're now carrying those boxes of food, that shovel, and whatever else you grabbed as you were loading up the vehicle. And as you're starting to walk in the woods, that's when you realize, holy shit, I left my Mossberg 590 back at home. It's still in the gun locker. I'm not going back for it because, you know, for all I know, my front yard now looks like a river of lava flowing through it, like it's straight off of Mustafar in Star Wars. But hey, you know, we got the perfect bug out spot. Maybe I won't have to worry about that shotgun. You know, hey, I still got that Glock 9mm that I kept hidden under the seat inside the station wagon there, or whatever the hell you got. You start walking into the woods, you know, you're tired, you're scared, you're exhausted. You don't notice on the ground signs that someone else has come through there already. You come up to whatever way you decide you're going to put in as your entrance into your bug out location. You come around the hill, you hear talking. Tell your family, sit tight as you pull out that 9mm from your pocket because you don't have a holster. You walk up just enough so you can look into your bug out location, and you find another family there. Now you need to make a choice as to what you're going to do. You know, does that family deserve to die just so that your family can sit in that spot? Or are you going to maybe see about tagging along with them? You know, you've prepped that area. You don't know if they have. You know, they could be out there just sitting there with just a couple backpacks and a couple shopping bags of food that they stole from a convenience store on the way up because they didn't prepare. You're going to meet, you know, link up with them. Extra hands, you know, makes lighter work. Or are you going to move on to your next location that you have prepared? Something for you to think about. Now, what if you're in a resistance situation? Someone's occupying that area already. You moving up there, this is your rally point. This is where your first patrol base is going to be so that you can do operations against those Chinese paratroopers falling out of the sky and those Russian naval infantry which are coming up on the shores on the East Coast. You find other people sitting inside your bug out or your patrol base location. Are you going to see if they're willing to tack on with you so you have some more trigger pullers? Or are you going to move on to the next potential patrol base location? Or, for all you know, you get out there and you got some federal agents sitting on the spot. If that's the case, how are you going to take them out? But for all you know, they could be defectors. Things to think about. Now, for all my engineer brothers in the Patriot Militia movements, always remember, essay ons.